Hello, friends and neighbors. We're taping these, to bring up to date right quick, 1 hour at a time when we're doing this, and we understand that some of you cities are only getting the second half, and so if you'll know exactly what we're doing, the first half is normally taken up more or less. Those of you in the real estate business, plus or minus, little sign. The first half is groups of people, strangers off the street, people on work release programs, the homeless whom we let use our restrooms will stand up and read what are known as Kyroots says. It's this group of stuff here and there, like it's epigrams, it's fables, aphorisms, myths, metaphors, parables, news items, rumors, adages, maxims, unbelievable historical pieces. And as they're being read, each page has a number, and a screen off camera flashes the number, and the people here in the fine studio audience, if the one they hear read struck their fancy, they write the number down, and then it's handed, they select me tonight, and then I look at the number and see if there's something Kyroot still refusing. Come on, cameras right off here, giving some sort of prompting, and if he sees fit, then I try to make some comment on the paper in addition to what it says here in the ever-popular black and white. There it is. Are you ready? So I will reread what it was before we try to paint some color into the original reading. And Kyroots said, one guy said, the best protection is self-protection. Yeah, replied his partner. Same thing with self. Even I was sitting out there, and the first time I heard it, I'll play along with it, it sounded sort of curious, or maybe I missed it, because many other people did. But consider the sentence. The guy says, and his partner many times, Kyroot uses that as like some other part of your own brain, a second thought you had about something. The man says the best protection is self-protection. Now there's a line, self-protection. He accents the self. And his partner says, yeah, the same with self. I did start out saying that I was going to try to make some comment to perhaps expand upon it, right? Does anybody know the full words to that song, Fool That I Am? All right, let's try it another way. The best protection is self-protection. Put the accent wherever the hell you want to. All right, either on self or protection. Now, consider that another part of you've looked another time, and you move the accent. I bet the people watching this for the first time are glad that I pointed out what's going on. Well, let's move fast, so maybe you'll forget. And Kyroots said, memory is not an accounting, but an argument. Which is almost, just my opinion, if that's all right, was enough, but then there is a second part to it. And Kyroots said, the music that moves the parade of secondary progress is cacophony. This is it. Music. Sounds. Noise. That is the kind of march music. Back to the first part. Memory is not an accounting, but an argument. Ordinarily, if we were going to describe memory, I'm sure it has all sorts of synonyms inside of the Roget's thesaurus, the synonym finder. But consider, accounting would be a great, reasonable description of what man's memory is individual. It'd be a description of what history even is, a collective memory. But consider the way he's putting it, that memory is not an accounting, but an argument. Now, you can remember things at a very specific, let us say, literal level, that you remember how to drive home, that you remember your mama's phone number, but you have no particular passion, let's say, about it. What is it that you remember that is worth remembering besides those kind of factual, minor details? What a man remembers is that which he has some sort of hormonal interest in. That is, he has some feeling about it. That's no big secret that the more you have some passion about something that has happened, the more vivid your memory seems to be. And people would normally consider that memory is some sort of recollection. It is a recording, not a CD, but It's that you made note of something and now you can conjure it back up. It is, by one degree, an account. Except Kyroots points out that memory at that level is not really an accounting but an argument. So rather than looking at it simply on the basis that a man remembers that which interests him, and that the more something interests you, that let us say that you're a big lover of Italian food, and sometimes your girlfriend or your husband or wife, they insist on Chinese, and in your head you know the pizza place's number. And yet when she says, come on, we've had Italian now for 3 nights in a row, let's have a little Chinese. And you stand at the phone and you have to go, oh, all right. And it's all you can do to remember it. And you don't have to worry about Freudian subconscious resistance, because she already knows that you'd rather have Italian, but it's simply that which apparently is of a more passionate interest to you is easier to remember. But now look at it another way. It's not a matter of accounting, it's an argument. It is as though a fish is trying to swim, and how much of the water, how many of the waves, how many of the wavelets does a fish remember? The ones he remembers, and I suggest, as per this Kyroots, to be the ones that, could he do so, he would take his little fin. Think about it. We got a couple of seconds. What are your, when I say your strongest memories, don't pull out either good or bad right now. Don't try to think, well, the greatest thing ever happened to me is when I won Mr. Congeniality back in high school. Or the worst thing that happened to me was when I came in second. Just think for a second, let it strike you. All the strongest memories. And now if you want to look at it at another level, I think, if I may second guess Kyroots or first guess him, this could have been about history. You could say history is not an accounting but an argument. Because when you reach the institution, the collective level of humanity, that is what history is. German history is slightly different from French history. Especially, I would guess, the last 40 or 50 years, I wouldn't be at all surprised if there is a certain different tenor to German history books over the, let's say in the last 50, 60 years, than there is the French books. But knowing that they're both decent, educated groups of people, then I'm sure that they mean well, but what are they doing in their accounting of that recent unpleasantness known as WW2 and in fact WW1? Is it really an accounting of what they recall? Well, sure, if you look at it that way. But also, what is it? It's a damn argument. Then Kyroots puts, after that, the music, the march music even, if you'd like that way, that moves the parade of secondary progress, is cacophony, which is not just a musical term, although it has musical connotation. It's noise. And it is actually into the musical definition, which I surely must be 2 or 3. It gets into dissonant music, which may not be as annoying theoretically to some of you younger people, but it's the kind of things that your forefathers, if they liked the kind of composers that they were sure that God favored, the Strausses, the Beethovens, then you begin to hear suddenly that you got people like Stravinsky or Ravel trying to drive the parade of human progress, and people go, Jesus, what is that noise? You can't march to that. You can't go anywhere with that. Is that not the basis of an argument? And Kyroots said, I'm going to read this one. I suspect, I hate to double guess, I don't mind double guessing to Kyroots, because I always figured I could take him in an arm wrestling contest. So, but I hate to do it to you guys, but I assume somebody just wanted to hear this again. And Kyroots said, it has to do with a letter to the advice doctor. Dear doctor, would it be fair to say that all the tales that men have concocted of adventures, expeditions, and these kind of nightly challenges, that all of these were just invented throughout the ages, but they're not actually tales about adventures and etc., but they are subconscious metaphors for each person's own internal desire to grow and expand? Dear sir, I don't think so. A lot of people think that they know it all. Yeah, I know what that's. So if I may speak for Kyroot, take that. And Kyroots said, what ordinary intelligence can never grasp or remember is that a combine, a locomotive, or a computer is always more intelligent than any of its blades, wheels, chips, or other component parts. If it were up to me, I could say that'd be enough. There is a little more. And that is not just a fooling around with words. I know that Kyroot has hit on some of this before, but that is right at the heart of what the little addition is, the closing line. But that's right at the heart of trying to think in any way new. Because although just on the surface, I'm sure that we could get engineers, reasonable people, computer technicians, but just reasonable people. If you said, all right, any great piece of machinery, the engine in an automobile, internal combustion engine, taken as a whole, that engine, the piece of machinery, is more intelligent in the broadest sense of the word. It knows more, it understands more about it, what its systemic function is. It's just simply more intelligent than any of the spark plugs individually, or any one piston. The computer itself, if intelligence, you can still put it in quotation marks, knows more about what's going on than the best chip in there. And you could say, well, that doesn't say anything. Well, it says a lot about the last line, by the way, which he throws in. Of course, once you understand the systemic structure of the human mind, you realize that perforce it could not be otherwise. May I translate that? Well, he left. I'll do it anyway. It's no matter what the mind does at the ordinary level, it will still, it has no choice, it will select here and there, based upon our all-time favorite of polar-based energy running all three-dimensional machinery, including the human brain, that it has no choice but to continually select. It doesn't talk about it in this manner, but I'm sure you'll see it. It selects individual parts of itself, of its functions, of what it's doing, that it takes to be of greater significance than what it is. It would be as though, is that helping any? How about a gigantic, like a lighthouse, and it periodically, every time it sweeps around, there's a guy standing out on the beach with a candle, and every time it hits the candle, and if the light itself in the lighthouse had some intelligence, and I think about it as the human mind, every time it passes that candle, it doesn't necessarily all the time, but it can. And we're talking about reasonable, intelligent people, not somebody that's deranged. It will, when it passes that, it will take the appearance of that candle as being of superior intelligence. It is something more significant than I am. There is something I need to know. What in the hell is that? Should I have left it alone? The human mind cannot conceive of the fact that at whatever level you take anything as much as you can in its totality, it is always more intelligent than its component parts. Try it one more way. The ordinary mind, if it did not use these terms, the most intelligent people on this planet, the most intelligent, if I could get them just for a second, they would hear this and understand it and agree. That is, if I said, all right, collectively, human knowledge, like the institutions of human knowledge, but collectively, humans no more than individuals. And if I said, now take that, either literally, and I'm talking to just the most intelligent, or even the ordinary people on this planet, is either being literally correct, or if that sounds a little harsh, move it just into a good metaphor. And they would go, yeah, you're right. And just like that, forget it. So Kyroots points out, can never grasp or remember, because even I could get people to see that. Whether you're one of those people or not tonight, I could get other decent, reasonable people to see that for a second, but they would turn right away, and you cannot hold it. You would select individuals. What the hell do you think heroes are? What the hell do you think biographies are written for? Autobiographies. When does anybody want to entertain somebody else's ideas? The machine itself, take it metaphorically, in this case the human mind, but any machine, a locomotive, will never understand. If you ask it, and it could talk, it will not understand that it is more intelligent than the biggest wheel on the locomotive. It cannot separate itself from it, and if you ask it specifically, it would say, well, I cannot say that I know more than these parts. It could, in fact, if it could really get symbolic on its own, it could say, well, I do not even exist without these parts. These parts are of great significance. The parts are crap. The parts are junk. They're metal. They're pieces off a shelf. Albeit with the wheels of a locomotive, I guess they'd take a nice sized shelf. But there's somewhere you can go in and you say, I need a left front wheel for a locomotive. And somebody somewhere will say, Charlie, go back there in the back and they'll get one. The structure of the human mind is such that it cannot ordinarily conceive, it cannot remember that it is more intelligent than any of its parts. If that were true, it'd collapse. I mean, if you could make the ordinary mind see that and forced it to remember it in some way, you could torture it, it would fall apart. Because in essence, you'd be saying, now all this is not true, but this is the way it would take it. Is you'd be telling it, you're more intelligent than you are. And for a split second, it would go, ah. But if you said, no, I ain't fooling around. You know a lot more than you do, because if it accepted that, you understand all excuses are gone. You got nowhere to turn to. You got no heroes, you got no good, you got no bad, you got no gods, and you got no demons. And it simply can't do it. Something has got to be, in part, greater than it is. There were several other Kyroots, by the way, tonight connected to that. If this doesn't help much, I don't know whether people requested them or not. But by God, we're going to press on. And Kyroots said, this was a guy addressing some crowd. He says, quote, poets and prophets have forever proclaimed, this world is not my home, is not my friend. And then he says to the crowd, I ask you, is that not astounding? And the gentleman in the audience punched his nephew and said, did he say astounding? And if he did, what do you think he really meant? Is it astounding? And it's not just a cheap shot at metaphysical poets, because that's not even cheap enough to keep track of. But the poets and those in religion, what have they continued to say? Is this world in some way is not my home. It is not my friend. It's nothing but heartache. And the guy simply asked, may I assume, or may I suggest to you, that this guy, if he's weird enough to be in a Kyroots story, who knows how weird he is. But let's assume he is really making no judgment. He is simply trying to get you to consider that the world's great thinkers, the poets, those who have rhapsodized about life, and those that apparently are representing greater forces in life, the religious people. Of course, they say a lot of stuff, but this is another one of the ones that they have in constant common, is they say, this world, this kind of ordinary life. Poets normally do it about heartbreak of love, losing, the queen died, my mother died, my father died. And the religious people just do it. You've been around religion as much as anybody else, I don't have to tell you, but it is this thing about this world is not my home. This world is not my friend. And people all the way from the religious to just the poetically inclined to those that just have bouts of depression, have a hormonal imbalance, will go, oh, how true. Okay, we all can say that. You've had 5,000 or 6,000 years to say it. But then the man simply points out, isn't that astounding that you're here alive? Not just you, but you and all of your genes now for 5,000 or 6,000 years have been here. Everybody, more or less, all the way back through your line, everybody lived 30, 40, 50, 60, 70 years. They got up, they ate, they screwed, they got cold, they got warm, they smiled, they had some children, they had a dog, they had nice food, a few ups, a few downs, And then people will stand there that apparently are superior in some way, at least enough of verbal charisma that they attract other people's attention, these poets and these prophets, and say, this world is not my home. And the audience could have just left the king's banquet, had a few drinks, been living it up, and on the way home they just happened to run into this lecturer, this guy on the street, and he says, this world is not my home. And guys are walking along, arm in arm, trying to sing, get on the good foot, or whatever they sang back in the Middle Ages. And suddenly they're struck, and they'll respond to it, that this world is not my home. The world is not your friend. And people are struck like, boy, is that the truth or what? And the man asks you, is that not astounding that people still do that? And in the crowd, the other part, which I'm not sure I'll even go into, but a guy punched his nephew and said, did he say astounding? Which, may I suggest again doing my third guessing of Kyroots, could have stopped there. Did he say astounding? Was kind of to encourage you to go. But then the guy went, hey, what he's saying is, if the speaker was good enough to point that out objectively and then turn to us and say, don't you find that astounding? Or if you don't like astounding, how about extremely curious? But he asked his nephew, he says, did he say astounding or highly curious? And if he did, what do you think he really meant? You say. Because to call it astounding, if you get your eye inside the door for a second, you'd have to say, wait a minute, that's far beyond astounding. May I suggest that that's what the old man was suggesting to his nephew? Just my guess. Well, this one is one of the ones that was sort of related to what we were talking about. That when I heard it the first time too, it wasn't all that clear, so perhaps I can help a little. And Kyroots said, mental stuff that a person might get on their own, outside the acceptable ideas of their time, might I say, fresh revolutionist ideas. That's what he's talking about. That people get on their own is revolutionist knowledge is the only knowledge, in parentheses he has compared to the metaphysical poets, is the only knowledge that does not lead to tears. Right, that is, back to the metaphysical poets, that covers the gamut, that and prophets. All religions have somebody somewhere, and of course the metaphysical poets throughout the ages. But even the religions, they all have a line that says something like, extreme knowledge brings extreme grief. Every religion on this planet that ever got past worshiping frogs and trees says a man with much knowledge is a man of sorrow. And I refer you again back to the other speaker about isn't it astounding, because you could have guys now, let's not say just leaving the king's banquet where they got free booze and something to eat. How about people that left a social over at the chancellor's house at the university, since some of us don't know what the hell a chancellor does, but a party, and they were over there hearing stimulating conversation, thinking how fortunate, how happy they were that they have pursued the world of academia, the world of the mind. And so they've left, and maybe they're walking down the street arm in arm, and they're trying to maybe sing something from Vivaldi instead of James Brown, but same kind, and they're having fun, they're walking along, being high-class people, and suddenly there's another speaker on the street, and this time the guy's saying the same old, this is a new line, but it's the same thing. He says, hark, and they all stop, and the guy says, a man of much knowledge, and they think, yeah, that's us, we're in favor of it. A man of much knowledge is a man of much sorrow. And those same mother sons standing there that were just thinking about how great it is to be an intellectual and be a professor of physics and English lit, they will hear that, and whether they take it religiously or just in a philosophical way, it doesn't matter, and people will respond to that the same way. That a man of much knowledge is a man of much sorrow. I leave it to you to ask yourself. You can play your own speaker part now about, isn't that astounding? All right. So this, to clean it up, what he's really saying is that revolutionist knowledge is the only knowledge, compared to what the rest of life says, that does not lead to tears. Because you do not have to take it as being some sort of curse of the gods, which is what most religion has done with the idea that, well, if you get too smart and, try to go to school, forget your upbringing. Some of you people who grew up in Birmingham, you go off and you go over to South Carolina and go to Clemson or somewhere, or go up to New York and go to City College for a couple of quarters, and you think you're hot stuff. Then you come back home and you find out, hey, just because you took 2 quarters of journalism, look at that, the sweet potatoes are still rotting in the ground. That was all connected. That was all connected as far as some of us are concerned. You figure it out. But it's simply this thing that people think, well, you're right, I've gotten too smart for my own good. And of course, religiously, they take it as being some sort of curse from the gods that, well, you can't think too much. Which I don't get in that religion, because they're just sitting ducks. Not just religion, but other things, but religion, a great one, saying, well, it's bad for a man to go off and get too much education. Because then, of course, ordinary people's done this before, and they think, why does the church tell me that? They're not the only ones, but they're the obvious ones to say, no, it's not good. And you say, well, why? Well, I don't know. It's just God wants you to trust Him and depend on Him by thinking about it a lot, which it works out real good. It works out real nice. But at any rate, and so then they're into this, a man of much knowledge is a man of much sorrow. That is, he doubts, he won't have faith. But it's also, in a philosophical sense, people respond to that are not religious. Said, yeah, that's right. You can think too much if it gets down to that. And Kyroots' notice here was that there is some validity to that. Because nothing that people believe can they conjure up out of whole cloth. I mean, there's some validity to it. When ordinary people would say, be they religious or be they just intellectual, atheists, agnostics, they will respond to the idea that it's possible in certain ways that a man who knows too much, a man who thinks too much in a certain way, will end up being a man of sorrow. That too much knowledge, too much thought brings tears. Kyroots is acknowledging that if they say that's true, it's true. But he's pointing out then that there may be what? A finger! I knew it. No, an exception. Revolutionist knowledge is the only knowledge, cf. the metaphysical poets and prophets, that does not lead to tears. So just between you and I, did you notice that Kyroots didn't say what it led to? He's not back, is he? How much? 2 fingers. That's hardly drunk enough to get you in your car. And M.C. Kyroots made note of another of the great cosmic door prizes. It's hard to dance alone, yet damn near impossible to dance with others and still see what the dance is about. May I just suggest to you, it's more of the complexities of wanting to be a hermit. The impossibility of profitably doing so, and several other things. I could redo this, perhaps. It's hard to box alone, but it's also hard to engage in the manly art of fisticuffs with others and walk away unblooded, with some understanding about, now I see what this game's about. You end up being the locomotive. You end up being a computer, and you take the parts, you take the pieces as being the game itself, or it's the best shot you can give it. And you do not fully understand in some more complex manner what the game is. As long as the locomotive takes his parts as being inseparable. In fact, being, in some cases, more important than I am, because I'm just observing this, the locomotive says, as he looks down at his large wheels, or as a computer looks down at the important chips. But as long as you're dancing that close to your parts, you'll never see what the game is. You'll never see what the dance is. And yet, just so we don't all get carried away and get either too happy or too sad. Notice he said, it's hard to dance alone. That's the first sentence, the first part. Yet, damn near impossible to dance with others and still ever see what the dance is all about. Well, that's worse than either being just optimistic or pessimistic, isn't it? Yes, I would say that is. That's worse than either one of those two, because this is just, I don't know. It's just worse. 15 seconds. And Kyroots said, that's all we got time for, I can read this one. Protecting yourself has nothing to do with harming others. Good night. Started to make a cheap crack unless you're going to sabotage your local cable service or something.